here we are, Talbot Street.
Everybody's come through the doors of this building, haven't they? And all sorts of things.
Yeah, they've come through for complaints, confessions to murder, and of course Jerry Hutch snuck in this building as well late at night one night and did an interview.
And flowers.
And flowers.
Don't forget the flowers, because we're going to tell all these stories at the Cork Podcast Festival, which is our show's actually on the 30th of March in the Opera House. Tickets are on sale from the corkpodcastfestival.ie, and they're selling fast. We've only got, 2 weeks left?
2 weeks left, yeah.
Right. A little bit complex, this, but we're going to try and bring everything together and make a bit of sense of it.
Okay.
Everything in the world.
Right.
And this literally is. We spoke about a story involving a guy called Ryan Wedding, a former Canadian snowboarding champion who is now on the FBI's most wanted list. He is accused of sort of running a cell, essentially, for the Sinaloa Cartel and transporting a huge amount of cocaine into the US and into Canada. Interesting kind of guy, not your usual sort of drug dealer. But the reason we were talking about it, of course, is because this accomplice of his, who is before the courts, 16 people, I think, are before the courts from his cell, even though he's on the run and believed to be hiding out in Sinaloa. This guy's a former trucker, Gurpreet Singh, and he has looked for bail. And in response to him looking for bail, the US, is it the FBI or the DEA?
Well, it's the FBI.
The FBI have come forward and they have said they do not believe he should get bail, pending this court case, that he would be a flight risk, that he has a huge amount of international connections, including the Kinahan organised crime group in Dubai.
Yeah.
And that he was in Dubai doing deals with various criminal organisations.
Yeah.
Including the Kinahan mob, we believe.
Yeah.
So anyway, this, for a second time, it has come up that the Kinahans have been named a second time during these bail hearings. But interestingly as well, and something we didn't mention in our last podcast, if anybody wants to listen to the last podcast, it'll give you a kind of good introduction to this story. But in this second bail hearing, in which the Kinahans have been named for a second time as being sort of associates of this Gurpreet Singh, it's also been discussed about this murder of a former member of this grouping who had turned witness for, and obviously was working sort of undercover as an informant for the FBI. But in January of 2024, he was murdered, they have said, during the court case in Medellin in Colombia. Now, scary, obviously. When
scary.
Informants here, they're getting murdered, but it's just another sort of element of this story. Was he the Dutch guy you were talking about recently?
No, it's a different guy. This guy is described as a Canadian Colombian. So he's obviously got dual nationality. Now, the FBI don't go into great detail about, they only describe him as a witness, but it's obviously an undercover person who's working for them. It's not somebody who's come into witness protection and then is looking back and giving statements. It's somebody that's obviously active, whether he was recording things or not. But the guy shot dead seems to have been a high-level gang member, effectively, and he had himself travelled to the United Arab Emirates at some point as a member of this gang, not on holidays, and that seems to be where we can surmise that that's where some of the information about the Kinahans comes from. What you see with Gurpreet Singh, who's applying for bail, he has this high level of travel. He's going to all the right places, if you want. The United Arab Emirates, Colombia and Mexico.
Yeah.
All of the right places if you're in a certain amount of business. He denies that he's involved in the drugs business. He said those trips were paid for by his girlfriend, and she was researching restaurant ideas because she runs a brunch restaurant place in Toronto.
Wow.
And so they were traveling around the world on her expense to look at other restaurants
to see how they operate. Now, of course, his defence counsel went to the High Court, the equivalent of, looking for bail on the basis that, and this is how the information came up about the informant being killed, that this Acevedo Garcia, as his name is, who was gunned down in a Medellin restaurant, that he was basically the key piece of information or evidence that the FBI had in relation to Gurpreet Singh and obviously Wedding, who's still on the run. But that they were saying that without him to give evidence that they don't have a case. Now, that was dismissed really by the court. But it's another really piece of the jigsaw, and obviously something that's happening there in around the background. And of course, the mention of the Kinahan organised crime group as part of this FBI case, which is one of the biggest cases in recent history that they've taken against a group of Americans and Canadians that are, accused of working directly with the Sinaloa Cartel.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing the changes in the Sinaloa Cartel. There's obviously this internal feud that's going on in Mexico, but you can see that that's become a less of a localized operation. So what Ryan Redding and his gang were doing basically was, rather than being, I suppose, a cell of it, they were becoming one of the main wholesalers of cocaine in the US, and certainly believed to be the main drugs gang in Canada. So they were they were buying the drugs in Colombia, I think, directly, maybe buying it in bulk with the Sinaloa Cartel, and the Sinaloa Cartel were moving it into the US. Once it got to the US, Ryan Wedding's gang, and it is claimed Gurpreet Singh, were in charge of storing it in stash houses across America, but a lot of them based in LA, and then that would be moved through parts of the US and up across the border into Canada. So you're talking about one of the premier drug trafficking organizations in the US alone. They've placed a £10 million bounty on Ryan Wedding's head. They believe he's still operating as a drug trafficker from a base in Sinaloa. And we've seen this, we were referring to there, a Dutch guy who was shot dead last month. So he was another example of somebody who not just was a client of the Sinaloa Cartel, but according to Dutch newspapers had become I suppose a player in the operation, in the feud, in the Sinaloa feud. So these European guys, these American guys, they seem to have been given a role really within the operation of that cartel. But again, a lot of the links then flow back to Dubai, basically, because what seems to happen is that whatever happens on the continent in the US or in America or in Europe, eventually the money seems to flow back to Dubai to be cleaned, basically.
And then it's, drug shipments are paid for from there through cryptocurrency, heading back to Mexico, heading back to Colombia. And obviously we have this position where we have the Kinahan organization seated in a place of power in Dubai for a long period of time, despite the sanctions by the US Treasury and all the song and dance about the Kinahans. They're still there, living pretty happily. Now, each time something happens, it must feel as if that day is getting closer when they are lifted. Firstly, being named in the US court in this very big drugs trial must be a very uncomfortable position for them to be in. The last place the Kinahans, Christy Sr., his son Christopher Jr. or Daniel want to be is in front of a US court on any sort of money laundering or drug trafficking related charges, because they can be guaranteed, okay, they'll get the best lawyers in town, but, you get convicted in the States and it's goodbye. I mean, you are never going to get out or see the light of day again. So that has to be their worst nightmare. But back in Dubai, and only this week, Edin Gacanin, who is the Bosnian connection of this entire European super cartel, which is headed up by Daniel Kinahan, he has been lifted in Dubai for a second time and finally looks like he is on his way to the Netherlands, where he was jailed for 7 years in 2023 in his absence.
Yes, now it's a bit unclear, but he certainly has been arrested on drug trafficking charges. This is coming out in the Dutch media, but it seems to have been confirmed in
the Balkans.
In the Balkans as well. Obviously, Edin Gacanin, again like Daniel Kinahan, again like Ryan Wedding, they have the same wanted poster. We're obviously very familiar with the Kinahans wanted poster from the US Treasury Department with the €5 million award or $5 million reward at the top. There is an equivalent one for Edin Gacanin, who has been hit with the same sanctions and the same reward offered. And last week there was a similar one for Ryan Wedding was put out using the same graphics. They've actually put 10 million on his head, probably because he's a homegrown guy. So obviously the US authorities are highly focused on these European drug gangs as well, because they haven't sanctioned loads and loads of people now. They have sanctioned obviously some other guys in Central America. But what we do know from Edin Gacanin is that the Dutch authorities are seeking his extradition. Now, it's not clear if this is new charges related to because he obviously, there seems to have been some sort of plea deal done, but it looks like they've either refiled them.
He was arrested and put into custody in Dubai before and was expected to be returned to the Netherlands, where he had been jailed in absentia.
Yeah.
But for reasons that have never become clear, he was released from custody in Dubai.
Yes, totally. I mean, he was released and he seems to have then appeared in a court in some way. It is slightly confusing. The legal system is different. So it's not clear if this is in connection with that previous plea deal that they're looking for him to be extradited at this point, or if it is separate new charges that they're seeking to extradite him on. But they certainly are seeking his extradition. His arrest comes following a request from Dutch law officials. It is definitely been confirmed. His lawyers have been contacted for comment and they don't seem to have given a comment at this point. So
you see, he's in a bad position really, Gacanin, because there is that, he has been convicted.
Yes.
So it's probably a simpler process of extradition, even though he was released previously in Dubai with no explanation given. But he has actually been convicted in a European court and, given a prison term, which he will serve when he eventually gets back. So it's a little bit more clear cut, is it not, than the likes of McGovern and Kinahan? Yeah,
I mean, it certainly is. Now, he's also been the focus of extensive leaks, I suppose, where we have seen his involvement in companies across Dubai. We've seen that he had huge involvement in property development, property companies in Dubai. While he had been involved in some businesses back in Holland and in the Balkans, he was openly a part of these companies. And again, you see the people that were involved in these companies with him included, I suppose you could say, people with very high political and connections to royalty within the Emirates. And you can see how that might have given him a certain security. But again, as this goes on, the Dutch officials seek his extradition. There's further trials going on in Bosnia, surrounding where you've heard about, phone hacks. Basically, the Gacanin organisation seemed to be using the Sky ECC encrypted network. We've heard a lot about political corruption.
It was evidence from the Sky hack that actually led to his conviction in the Netherlands directly from that in 2023. Gacanin is part of what's called the Tito and Dino cartel. And he's originally from Bosnia, isn't he? And he was a war refugee to the Netherlands where he grew up.
Yes, he grew up. I think he came as a young man, and he's a Dutch Bosnian national.
And he had sort of, like everybody, there seemed to have been these, pea shoot beginnings where he was a sort of a street dealer, and he very quickly is believed to have greased some paws and some hands. He became, the Balkans would say, as big as he did because of corruption. Yeah. Because the money he earned out of the cocaine trafficking, and he's suspected of smuggling 2,500 kilos of it into the ports of Rotterdam and Hamburg. He used a lot of his money, a lot of his wealth, in order to buy favours from police and ultimately politicians. I mean, in the Balkans, they described this Tito and Dino cartel as being a drug organisation that literally tried to take over the state of Bosnia.
I mean, look, they've seen, and you can see in those hacked messages how they speak about having people in their pocket. When he has landed in some of these countries, you can see him being greeted by military people who provide him with personal protection. He has been described as the Pablo Escobar of the Balkans. What seems to have been the case is that members of that cartel, of course, the Dino and Tito cartel, have been directly arrested in Colombia. They seem to have had a particular speciality in terms of the logistical movements. So these huge shipments of cocaine will be bought at source in Colombia by the cartel, maybe involving that super cartel, but that the Dino and Tito cartel would in particular take charge of getting it across into Europe and landing it. They huge amounts of money involved.
Interestingly, some of the messages on the hack would suggest that he was talking about also shipping the chemicals for the production of methamphetamine, crystal meth. That brings you back nearly almost totally to the Sinaloa Cartel and them having, operatives in Dubai doing business. And it also shows what Europol are warning again and again, that, it is a risk to Europe that they're going to start, they are going to start trying to flood Europe with crystal meth, which we don't have a massive problem with.
No, we don't. We don't.
As yet.
No, and there's other synthetic drugs that we don't even know the name of that will become a feature of the Irish drug scene in no time at all. But again, you see this base in Dubai, that these guys are living over there. They continue to operate from there. Certainly, they're cleaning their money over there. And whatever is happening in terms of justice, it seems really, really unclear. I mean, Edin Gacanin has been out on bail for the last year. Why this rearrest occurs now, we don't know.
The information doesn't come
cleanly
from there. The courts don't appear to be accessible. The media are certainly not reaching out with any information to us here in Europe, with anything in relation to our own, the people we'd be interested in. Same has been said to me by our Dutch counterparts. It's impossible to get information out of Dubai.
But except that we do know that these people, the Kinahans included, Gacanin included, Ryan Wedding included, these people are the target for US law officials, not a casual target, not people that are getting a mention here and there. These are prime targets for US law officials. And the reason that they are is because of their global reach, and it's also because of their involvement in using third-party actors to clean some of that money, including people like Hezbollah and other organizations of that kind. The reason that the Americans are after them is because they are huge. There's Edin Gacanin is formally sanctioned by the US, just like the Kinahans, and you'd have to think that their time in Dubai, while they've certainly managed to muddy the waters, the days are coming.
I just wanted to give a little update, if we have any, on Raffaele Imperiale, our Italian friend.
Yeah.
He is still in situ giving information. He's been doing it for a long time to the Italians, hasn't it? Because of course he came back on this hopes of a reduced sentence for himself to Italy, and there's a queue of people lined up to try and talk to him about what he knows. And of course he will know everything.
Yeah.
But there's no sense that anything else is breaking within that super cartel. Certainly nothing in the Dutch arena.
Yeah.
Nothing with Gacanin. And so far, nothing we know of with the Kinahans, even though, of course, there is plenty of online speculation of them being, super kind of informants for everybody, and that's on the basis that they just have not been lifted yet.
No, I mean, I think you're seeing again, there was further stories recently in the Sunday Times about their ability to launder money through Asia, through Southeast Asia, places that we wouldn't even have any reach into at all. Look, all you know is that if they are being put forward as somebody that in the Gurpreet Singh case, if the Kinahans are being named and put forward as one of the biggest drug organizations in the world by high-level US officials on the record in court papers, you don't want to be in that position,
no,
what?
You do not.
No.
Right, okay, thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola. Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.